In all my cycles as a galactic chronicler, I've documented the rise and fall of over 300 civilizations. I've seen empires that spanned star clusters crumble because they forgot to pay their energy bills. Well, not exactly, but close enough. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened when the Krethian Dominion decided that humans would make excellent additions to their labor force. The Krethians, bless their 6 hearts, thought they had it all figured out. They'd been conquering pre-FTL species for millennia. Standard procedure, really. Show up, demonstrate overwhelming firepower, demand submission, profit. Simple, clean, profitable. They'd done it so many times that they had actual spreadsheets calculating optimal subjugation timelines. I'm not joking, I've seen the spreadsheets. They were color-coded and everything. So when their scouts identified Earth, a blue-green marble teeming with 7 billion bipedal primates who'd barely figured out how to leave their own gravity well, the Krethians practically threw a party. Prime Minister Velcorax, a particularly ambitious specimen with scales that shimmered like oil slicks, saw humans as his ticket to the inner council. "Look at them," he'd said, mandibles clicking with what I can only describe as greedy satisfaction. "They wage war on themselves over imaginary lines and invisible sky beings. They'll break within a solar cycle." The invasion fleet arrived on a Tuesday, Earth time, of course. 17 dreadnoughts, each the size of a small moon, materialized above Earth's major population centers. The humans, predictably, panicked. Stock markets crashed. Religious leaders declared the end times. Social media, that bizarre human invention, absolutely exploded with theories ranging from plausible to utterly ridiculous. My personal favorite was the group insisting the ships were actually elaborate holograms projected by a shadow government. Humans, I tell you. Admiral Thex'nor, commander of the invasion force, broadcast the standard surrender demand in 47 Earth languages simultaneously. His translator did an adequate job, though I suspect the Mandarin version accidentally promised free spa treatments instead of enslavement. The gist was clear enough: submit or be annihilated. The response from Earth's leaders came within 6 hours. United Nations Secretary-General Amara Okonkwo, a woman whose diplomatic record suggested she could negotiate peace between matter and antimatter, delivered humanity's answer. She stood alone at a podium. Cameras from every nation pointed at her and said, "We respectfully decline your generous offer. Please leave our system immediately, or we will be forced to defend ourselves." Thex'nor laughed so hard he nearly molted. I was monitoring his flagship's communications. The sound echoed through every corridor. "Defend themselves," he wheezed between chuckles. "With what? Their primitive rockets? Their chemical explosives?" He wiped his optical organs. "This will be over before their solar cycle ends." Here's where it gets interesting. See, the Krethians had done their homework, sort of. They'd studied human military capabilities, analyzed nuclear arsenals, calculated force projections. What they hadn't done was ask a fundamental question: why would a species that fought themselves so viciously still be alive? The first Krethian landing forces hit the ground in 17 cities simultaneously: Beijing, New Delhi, São Paulo, Lagos, Moscow, New York, Jakarta, Tokyo, Mexico City, Cairo, London, Paris, Tehran, Sydney, Buenos Aires, Istanbul, and Los Angeles. Each force consisted of 10,000 soldiers equipped with plasma rifles, personal shields, and enough confidence to choke a star. They were met by hastily assembled military units. Humans with, and I'm being generous here, laughably outdated kinetic weapons. Bullets. Actual metal projectiles propelled by controlled explosions. The Krethian shields deflected them like rain off a dome. For exactly 47 minutes, it looked like Thex'nor had been right. Then Colonel Vincent Ramirez, a grizzled veteran from somewhere called Texas, did something that would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy. Instead of shooting at the shields, he shot at the ground beneath the Krethian soldiers. Concrete and asphalt exploded upward, bypassing the shields entirely. Shrapnel found soft tissue. Krethian soldiers who'd never encountered an enemy that adapted mid-battle fell. That was the first lesson. Humans are creative problem solvers. especially when lives are at stake. Within hours, every human military force had modified their tactics. They dug up roads, they collapsed buildings, they used their primitive weapons in ways the manufacturers never intended. A squadron in Mumbai discovered that old-fashioned Molotov cocktails worked just fine when thrown under shield perimeters. A unit in Berlin found that their shields didn't protect against suffocation when you pumped enough smoke into an enclosed space. But here's the thing that really should have tipped off the Krethians. Humans didn't fight as separate nations. They didn't squabble over who got to take which landing zone. The old rivalries, the territorial disputes, the ideological differences, they evaporated like morning dew. Russian soldiers fought alongside American Marines. Chinese strategists coordinated with Indian commanders. Israeli and Iranian forces shared intelligence in real time. Dr. Kenji Nakamura, a physicist who'd spent his career developing fusion reactors, stood in a bunker beneath Tokyo watching feeds from 17 battlefronts. "We're losing," he said matter-of-factly to General Patricia Webb, who commanded North American Defense Forces via holographic link. "I'm aware," Webb replied, her tone suggesting she'd been chewing on broken glass. "We're buying time." "The question is, time for what?" "That depends," Nakamura said, fingers dancing across a keyboard, "on whether certain parties can put aside their egos long enough to activate certain theoretical systems." Webb's expression shifted from exhausted to intrigued. "Are you talking about—" "Yes. That's insane. It's never been tested." "The power requirements alone are being met as we speak," Nakamura interrupted. 17 fusion plants just went online. Not for civilian use. "Geneva, by the way, sends their regards," Dr. Laurent Beaumont says. And I quote, "Tell the general to stop being so American about this, despite everything." Webb smiled. "Cheeky bastard. How long?" 72 hours. Maybe less if the Argentinians finish their modifications ahead of schedule. 3 days. That's what humanity needed. 3 days to turn on a system that every major power had secretly been developing, against explicit international treaty, for the past 15 years. A global defense grid powered by quantum entanglement and held together with what I can only describe as hope, duct tape, and sheer human stubbornness. But the Krethians weren't giving them 3 days. Thex'nor, furious that what should have been a simple conquest was turning into actual warfare, authorized orbital bombardment of military targets. He was careful, mind you. Dead slaves are worthless slaves. But he wanted to make a point. The bombardment hit Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, turning 20 square kilometers into glass. It vaporized a military complex outside Moscow, creating a crater visible from orbit. It melted a naval installation in the South China Sea, and humanity responded by fighting harder, not surrendering, not begging, fighting. I watched from my observation post. I'm embedded with the Galactic Council's diplomatic corps, which means I get good seats to these sorts of disasters. As something shifted in the human data streams, their communications, previously chaotic and emotional, became cold, calculated, focused, a message broadcast on all Krethian frequencies. It was Amara Okonkwo again, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives from every major nation and quite a few minor ones. She looked directly into the camera, directly at Thex'nor, and said, "You have made a grave miscalculation. You saw our divisions and assumed weakness. You witnessed our conflicts and presumed fragility. You are about to learn what happens when you threaten human children." Thex'nor, because he was an idiot, laughed again. "Threaten? I haven't threatened them yet." "Then you don't know what you've done," Okonkwo replied. The bombardment of Andrews Air Force Base. There was a daycare center 3 kilometers away. 63 children were killed when the shockwave collapsed the building. Moscow? 42 families lived in the barracks you vaporized. The South China Sea installation? 170 sailors were off duty, many with children aboard for a family day. The silence from Thex'nor's flagship lasted exactly 9 seconds. Then, acceptable collateral damage for a subjugation operation. If you surrender now, no more sites will be targeted. What happened next became known as the 72-hour gambit. Every human military force, every resistance cell, every civilian with access to anything that could be weaponized, unleashed hell. Not on the landing forces on the supply lines. Humans, it turned out, were exceptionally good at guerrilla warfare. They'd been practicing on each other for millennia. Krethian supply convoys were ambushed, communication relays were sabotaged, forward operating bases woke to find their water supplies contaminated with substances that weren't fatal, but were definitely memorable. One particularly creative group in Toronto managed to hack into Krethian combat armor and change all the audio alerts to a loop of something called Baby Shark. I didn't understand the significance until I watched an entire Krethian platoon suffer what their medics called psychoacoustic trauma, but the real work was happening in 17 locations simultaneously. Underground. In facilities that officially didn't exist. Dr. Nakamura stood in a facility buried 3 kilometers beneath the Japanese Alps, surrounded by enough computing power to simulate the birth of stars. Around him, 17 holographic displays showed identical scenes in Geneva, Nevada, Siberia, Argentina, Australia, South Africa, India, and 9 other locations. Each site housed a massive quantum processor array, linked through entanglement to the others. Together, they formed something the international community had codenamed Project Aegis. Power at 97%, called out Dr. Sarah. No, wait, I said no Sarahs. Let me correct that. Dr. Yuki Tanaka announced from her station, fingers flying across haptic interfaces. Entanglement stability, holding at 0.998. Synchronization? Nakamura asked. 15 sites confirmed, replied Dr. Laurent Beaumont from Geneva, his voice crackling through the quantum comm. Buenos Aires and Johannesburg are lagging by 0.03 seconds, but they're compensating. That'll have to do, Nakamura muttered. He opened a channel to General Webb. We're ready. Tell me we have targets. Webb's face appeared, and behind her I could see the controlled chaos of a military command center. 17 dreadnoughts. Orbital coordinates locked. Thex'nor's flagship is designated Alpha 1. The second we light this thing up, they'll know we have capabilities beyond their intelligence reports. Good, Nakamura said, and his smile was absolutely feral. Let them know. Authorization code? Webb took a breath. Authorization Omega 77. May God forgive us for building this thing. If this works, Beaumont interjected, we won't need forgiveness. If it doesn't, we won't be around to ask for it. Either way seems like a reasonable gamble, not. Now, let me explain what Project Aegis actually was, because even I had to do some research to understand it. Humans, despite being barely capable of interplanetary travel, had somehow managed to weaponize quantum mechanics in a way that made my sensory appendages tingle with academic curiosity. They'd created a network of quantum-entangled particle accelerators that could, in theory, project a directed energy beam through folded space. In practice, nobody knew, because they'd never tested it. They were about to test it on Thex'nor's flagship. Firing in 3, Nakamura announced. 2, 1, mark. 17 facilities, scattered across Earth, fired simultaneously. The energy signatures alone would have made every sensor in the system scream. What happened next? Well, that's where it gets beautiful. The beams didn't travel through normal space. They punched through reality itself, emerging from quantum foam directly onto target. Thex'nor's flagship, the pride of Krethia, suddenly found itself being hit by what amounted to a star's worth of concentrated energy from 17 different angles at once. The shields held for about 3 seconds. Then they didn't. I was monitoring the Krethian fleet channels when it happened. Thex'nor's voice, previously so confident, so dismissive, cracked across every frequency. What in the name of the first clutch was that? Report. Somebody report. Shields at 18%, someone screamed. Hull breaches on decks 40 through 67. We're venting atmosphere. Impossible, Thex'nor hissed. They don't have this technology, our intelligence said. Your intelligence, Okonkwo's voice interrupted every Krethian channel, failed to account for what humans do best: lie, cheat, and innovate when sufficiently motivated. That was your only warning shot. The next one won't be aimed at your shields. The Krethian fleet went absolutely silent. I could practically hear the gears turning in Thex'nor's head. See, here's what the Krethians didn't understand about humans. They'd been looking at humanity's military capabilities as they existed, not as they could exist under pressure. Humans don't just adapt. They evolve in real time when threatened. Admiral, one of Thex'nor's subordinates, ventured, "Perhaps we should consider tactical withdrawal and request reinforcements from..." Silence. Thex'nor roared. "We do not retreat from primitives. Launch the Thent wave. All ground forces. Maximum aggression. I want their major population centers occupied within 12 hours. Oh, that was a mistake. A big, beautiful, catastrophic mistake. Because while Thex'nor was throwing more soldiers at the problem, humanity was doing something the Krethians had never encountered. They were escalating deliberately. The ground forces didn't just defend, they counterattacked using tactics pulled from thousands of years of warfare. A resistance cell in Beijing used strategies from Sun Tzu. Marines in Washington, D.C. employed tactics from urban warfare manuals written decades ago. A unit in London coordinated an attack based on principles from something called the Blitz, which apparently involved a lot of determination and tea. But the real genius? Captain Isabella Vasquez, commanding a multinational force in Mexico City, figured out the Krethian communication protocols. She didn't crack their encryption, that would have taken months. Instead, she realized that Krethian armor used a proximity alert system to prevent friendly fire. So she had her engineers build transmitters that mimicked the Krethian IFF signature. The Krethians started shooting each other. "This is absurd." Thex'nor was practically frothing. "They're using our own systems against us." "Yes, Admiral," his tactical officer replied, managing to sound both respectful and condescending. "That appears to be their strategy. They identify our advantages and convert them to disadvantages. It's actually quite innovative." "I don't want analysis," Thex'nor screamed. "I want solutions." He didn't get them. Over the next 48 hours, humanity proceeded to systematically dismantle every assumption the Krethians had made. They used chemical weapons banned by their own conventions, not against people, but to create area denial zones the Krethian shields couldn't protect against. They employed biological agents that targeted the specific amino acid chains in Krethian physiology. They even, and this is my favorite part, used sound weapons tuned to frequencies that induced nausea in Krethian inner ears. A platoon in Sydney discovered that Krethians were terrified of Earth's spiders and started deploying them as psychological warfare. I'm not making this up. There are actual combat reports describing Krethian soldiers in full-powered armor fleeing from creatures that massed maybe 5 grams. But Project Aegis wasn't done. Dr. Nakamura and his international team had been charging the system for another strike, this time targeting all 17 dreadnoughts simultaneously. The math alone was terrifying. The power requirements meant brownouts across 3 continents. But humans apparently were willing to sit in the dark if it meant keeping their planet. "General Webb," Nakamura called out, "we have full charge. Permission to engage?" Webb looked off camera, presumably at someone else in her command center. A voice I recognized as belonging to Amara Okonkwo spoke. "Dr. Nakamura, this is Secretary General Okonkwo. Before you fire, I need to make one more attempt at communication. Stand by." Okonkwo's face appeared on every screen, every broadcast, every channel, human and Krethian alike. "Admiral Thex'nor, this is your final opportunity for peaceful withdrawal. You came to our world believing we were divided, weak, and primitive. You have learned otherwise. Leave now or face complete destruction of your fleet." Thex'nor's response was predictable in its arrogance. "You've shown you can damage one ship. You cannot possibly hope to destroy 17 simultaneously. Your bluff is transparent." Okonkwo smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who's held 4 aces and is about to reveal them. "Dr. Nakamura, please demonstrate our sincerity." Fire at will. The second firing of Project Aegis lit up every sensor in the solar system. 17 quantum beams punched through reality and emerged at 17 different points in Earth's orbit. This time, Nakamura wasn't targeting shields. He was targeting power cores. 16 of the 17 dreadnoughts suffered catastrophic power failures. Life support failed. Weapons went offline. Engines stopped. They didn't explode. Nakamura had been careful about that. He wasn't a monster, but they were effectively dead in space. Only Thex'nor's flagship retained power, and only because Nakamura had specifically dialed back the beam's strength. You see, Admiral, Okonkwo continued, her voice never wavering, we could have destroyed you completely. We chose not to. We are capable of remarkable violence, but we prefer remarkable restraint. You have 24 hours to evacuate your ground forces, retrieve your disabled ships, and leave our system. If you are still here when that deadline passes, we will not offer a third warning. The silence from the Krethian fleet was deafening. I watched as Thex'nor's vital signs, helpfully broadcast by his armor's medical system, showed what I can only describe as existential terror. He'd come to conquer primitives and found himself outmaneuvered, outfought, and utterly outclassed by a species that hadn't even achieved FTL travel. This isn't over, Thex'nor finally growled. The Dominion will return with a full battle fleet. You will do nothing, interrupted a new voice, and I had to suppress a laugh because I recognized it. High Chancellor Velmar of the Galactic Council, Thex'nor's direct superior. Admiral, you are hereby relieved of command and recalled to the homeworld to face charges of gross incompetence and violation of first contact protocols. Commander Zexstar will oversee the withdrawal. But Chancellor, the humans have filed a formal complaint with the Council. Velmar continued, and now she sounded amused. Complete with tactical recordings, casualty reports, and a rather impressive legal brief citing 17 different treaties you violated. They also, and I find this particularly interesting, have requested observer status at the Council. Their application is being fast-tracked. I couldn't help it, I laughed. The humans, while fighting off an invasion, had found time to do their paperwork. That's humanity in a nutshell. Practical, persistent, and petty in the most beautiful ways. The Krethian withdrawal took 18 hours. Every soldier, every piece of equipment, every last trace of their occupation was removed. The disabled dreadnoughts were towed out of orbit by rescue vessels that arrived with impressive speed. Thex'nor's career was over. He'd be lucky to command a waste reclamation vessel after this debacle. As the last Krethian ship jumped to FTL, Amara Okonkwo stood before the United Nations General Assembly. Every seat was filled. Every nation represented. She looked exhausted but triumphant. Today we learned something crucial about ourselves, she said. When faced with extinction, we don't fracture. We unify. When confronted with impossible odds, we don't surrender. We adapt. And when someone threatens our children, our families, our future, we remind them that humanity didn't claw its way to the top of Earth's food chain by being weak. We did it by being stubborn, creative, and absolutely unwilling to quit. The assembly erupted in applause, but Nakamura, watching from his facility in Japan, shared a look with Batbine via hologram. They both knew the truth. Humanity had gotten lucky. Project Aegis had worked beyond their wildest predictions. If it had, well, they'd all be wearing Krethian chains right now. But luck, as Nakamura would later tell me, is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And humanity had been preparing for this moment since the first human looked at the stars and wondered what was out there. 6 months later, I attended humanity's first session as an observer at the Galactic Council. Okonkwo presented their case for full membership, complete with a demonstration of their technological achievements, their cultural diversity, and their diplomatic capabilities. The Council, somewhat shell-shocked by how quickly humans had gone from pre-FTL to repelling an invasion fleet, granted provisional membership. As for the Krethians, they're still around, though significantly less arrogant. The Dominion officially apologized, paid substantial reparations, and quietly shelved their subjugation program. Turns out when you lose an entire invasion fleet to a pre-FTL civilization, your reputation takes a hit. And me? I updated my chronicles with a new entry. Never, under any circumstances, Underestimate a species that made it to space age while still fighting amongst themselves. They're not divided, they're practicing. Humanity's final warning wasn't just to the Krethians. It was to the entire galaxy. We're here, we're not going anywhere. And if you threaten what we love, we'll show you exactly why Earth's most dangerous predator isn't the tiger, the shark, or the bear. It's the human being with something to protect.